Megan lay in the dim light of her bedroom, the glow of the bedside lamp casting shadows across the soft walls. Her hand instinctively rested on the small curve of her stomach. The baby. She could already feel a bond, as though her body was telling her the tiny life growing inside her was everything she needed. She whispered softly to the child inside her, hoping to reassure it, to promise a future of love, safety, and warmth. Her husband, Daniel, lay next to her, his back turned toward her in the darkness. His breathing was steady but distant, a rhythm Megan had grown too accustomed to over the past few months. He was no longer the man who laughed easily or reached out to hold her in the middle of the night. Lately, it felt like he was a shadow of the man she had married. Megan brushed the thought aside. He was stressed, the pressure of his work. She had to understand. She smiled to herself as she adjusted the pillows behind her. Patience was key, she thought. Love wasn't always about constant closeness. Sometimes it was about giving space. She let her mind drift, imagining the future with their baby. Morning walks, soft laughter filling the house, and a life filled with simple, beautiful moments. But Megan's hopes were built on fragile ground, a foundation she didn't know was already cracked. She felt the unease in her chest as her thoughts wandered back to the moments before. Daniel's phone had been ringing constantly today. Something about work, he said, but it wasn't work that caused the tension she now felt in the pit of her stomach. It was the way he'd been looking at her lately, like he was seeing someone else. The disconnection, the space between them, widening by the day. Megan, you're overthinking it. Daniel had said earlier that morning when she asked if everything was okay. His tone was quick, dismissive. He always brushed things off, always avoided the deeper conversations. She nodded, forcing a smile, even as her heart pounded in her chest. That night, as the silence between them thickened, Megan finally drifted into a restless sleep. The weight of the uncertainty hung over her like a cloud, but she couldn't bring herself to ask more. Not yet. She wanted to believe that time would heal the distance. But there was something she didn't know, a secret that had already begun to unravel her life. Across the city, in a high-rise apartment overlooking the bustling streets, Vanessa stood by the window, her gaze fixed on the bright lights below. She adjusted her tight black dress, pulling it down to make sure it fit just right. She smiled to herself, knowing she was ready. Tonight was the night. Vanessa had never been the kind of woman who waited. She didn't need anyone to choose her. She took what she wanted. And tonight, she was going to take what Megan had, what was rightfully hers. The affair had started as a distraction. Daniel had been friendly, distant enough to remain interesting, but she quickly realized that it wasn't just a fling. There was something about him, something she could exploit. He had the life she wanted, the stability she'd never had, the respect, the power. She wasn't about to let Megan stand in her way. Vanessa stepped back from the window and picked up her phone, dialing Daniel's number. She smiled as she heard his voice on the other end, tired but compliant. "I'll be there soon," she said softly, the words laced with intent. She knew what she was doing. Every move she made was calculated, deliberate. She knew Daniel's marriage was crumbling. She knew Megan was weak, vulnerable. A pregnant woman was no match for her. Vanessa was ready to finish what she had started. Back in Megan's apartment, as the evening stretched into night, she finally found herself alone, sitting in the silence of their once shared space. Daniel had stayed late at work again, an excuse he had used too many times lately. Megan glanced at the clock. 10:45 p.m. She was tired, but the anxiety wouldn't let her rest. She decided to take a walk, get some fresh air to clear her mind. Her hand rested on her belly as she stood, her legs still heavy from the weight of pregnancy. The doctor had assured her everything was fine, but the doubt gnawed at her. Was she doing enough for her baby? Was she enough for Daniel? Megan grabbed her coat and stepped out into the cool night air. As she walked down the stairwell of their apartment building, the quiet hum of the city in the distance seemed to amplify the chaos brewing in her life. It wasn't until she reached the bottom of the stairs that she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting to see one of the neighbors or perhaps Daniel, but instead it was Vanessa, standing at the top of the stairs with a chilling smile on her face. "Megan, right?" Vanessa asked, her voice sweet, but there was something cold in her eyes. Megan nodded, unsure of how to respond. "I need to talk to you," Vanessa continued, taking a slow step down the stairs. Her heels clicked against the concrete, echoing in the silence. About Daniel. Megan's heart raced. What did this woman want? She didn't understand, but something in her gut told her this encounter wasn't just a coincidence. "I don't think there's anything to talk about," Megan said, her voice wavering. "You should go." Vanessa didn't move. Instead, she smiled that cold, calculating smile. "You don't get it, do you?" she said softly, her eyes narrowing as she approached. "He's mine. And you? You're just a temporary distraction." Megan's breath caught in her throat. Something in the air shifted. She felt a sudden jolt of panic, but couldn't move. Her legs felt heavy, the weight of pregnancy slowing her down, making her feel exposed and vulnerable. Vanessa closed the distance between them, her heels clicking louder as she stepped closer. "You're standing in my way," Vanessa whispered. And before Megan could react, Vanessa shoved her hard in the chest. Megan's body collided with the stairs before she even knew what happened. The sharp force of Vanessa's push sent her off balance, her feet scrambling for purchase on the cold concrete. She reached out instinctively for the railing, but it was too late. The world tilted, the edge of the stairs drawing closer. The sudden impact against the hard stone was like a thunderclap in her mind. Pain exploded in every direction as her body twisted midair, slamming against the steps with a sickening thud. Her stomach lurched, and her hand, which had instinctively moved to protect the life inside her, pressed against her belly as if she could shield it from the fall. The sharp pain in her side made her gasp, the breath catching in her throat as her vision blurred. Her hands trembled, clutching the floor beneath her, trying to steady herself as the world spun. The cold tiles seemed to swallow her, each breath more desperate than the last. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible, her vision fading. Vanessa stood at the top of the stairs, her chest heaving as she watched Megan struggle to breathe. Her heart raced, but there was no regret, no guilt. The sight before her wasn't the victory she had hoped for, but she didn't let the panic show. She had done what needed to be done. Megan's blood was already spreading beneath her, staining the cold tiles a dark red. The stark contrast a cruel reminder how far Vanessa had gone to get what she wanted. She turned on her heel and walked briskly toward the door, not bothering to look back. Vanessa had never been one to hesitate. She had made her move, and now it was time to escape before anyone suspected a thing. As she walked away, her heels clicking against the floor with every step, she glanced over her shoulder. Megan's body lay motionless at the bottom of the stairs, her breath shallow, her hand still clutching her belly as if trying to hold on to her baby, her future. Vanessa's stomach twisted, but she shoved the feeling down. This was not about her emotions. This was about winning. Megan's phone buzzed from the floor beside her, the screen lighting up with an incoming call. It was Daniel's name that flashed on the screen, but Megan couldn't respond. She could barely move. Each breath felt like it could be her last, each second slipping away from her, out of her control. The pain in her side intensified, and her hand, which had still been clutching her belly, slid down to the cold floor. A moment of clarity pierced through the haze of pain. She couldn't lose the baby. She couldn't let this be the end of everything she had worked for. With every ounce of strength she had left, she managed to whisper, "Help!" But the world around her was growing quieter, the buzzing of the phone growing fainter in her ears as the darkness closed in. At that moment, across town, Daniel sat in his office, his eyes glued to his phone. The calls from Megan had been constant, and yet he had ignored them all. He couldn't bring himself to answer. Not when Vanessa had texted him again. Not when the affair had only intensified in the past few weeks. He had promised himself he would fix things with Megan. He had promised her he would change. But every day felt like a little bit more of their relationship slipped further away. As he sat in silence, his thoughts spiraled, the guilt eating at him. He had failed her. Megan had been there for him, supported him, and yet he had pushed her away for someone who could never be what she was. Vanessa wasn't a woman who wanted to understand him. She wanted to control him. She wanted to be the one. And for a while, he had let her. His phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Vanessa. "Did you see what happened?" The knot in his stomach tightened. His gut told him something was terribly wrong, but he couldn't bring himself to open the message just yet. The office door opened, and one of his assistants poked her head inside. "Mr. Wills, there's an emergency. You need to get to the hospital. Your wife." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. His wife. He leapt to his feet. "What happened to her?" "There's been an accident. She's at St. Mary's. You need to come now." Megan had been in the hospital for what felt like hours. Every moment felt like it dragged by, each one more excruciating than the last. The beeping of the monitors in the background had become a constant companion, their steady rhythm both reassuring and haunting. She was alive. Barely. The doctors had done what they could, but the truth was it was touch and go. "Mrs. Wills?" A nurse called gently, entering the room. "How are you feeling?" Megan tried to speak, but her throat felt dry and her mouth was parched. She tried to shift, but the pain in her side was too intense. "Megan, you've been through a lot," the nurse said softly, her voice filled with compassion. "But your baby is going to be okay." Megan nodded weakly, but in her heart, she was still screaming. She had survived. But what about the baby? The thought of losing the life inside her, the one thing she had held on to, was too much to bear. In the corner of the room, Chief Wills, Daniel's father, sat quietly, his face unreadable. He had arrived earlier, his calm demeanor unshaken even in the face of his daughter-in-law's condition. His presence was a silent reminder of the weight of the situation. Outside the hospital, the world was moving, but in Megan's mind, time had frozen. As Daniel arrived at the hospital, he rushed past the front desk, barely registering the nurse's calls. His mind was on one thing, Megan. His stomach was in knots as he navigated the corridors, trying to get to her side. When he saw his father in the waiting area, he froze. "Dad?" Daniel asked, voice strained. The older man stood slowly, his eyes full of quiet authority. "She's still unconscious, but stable. They're doing everything they can." "Where is she?" Daniel demanded, his voice cracking with worry. "This way," his father said calmly. But as Daniel followed his father down the hallway, the anxiety and dread gnawed at him. What had really happened? Who had pushed Megan? Who was behind this? He needed answers. And more than anything, he needed to make things right. But deep down, he knew it wasn't just about saving Megan. It was about saving himself before it was too late. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air, mingling with the constant beep of the machines surrounding Megan. Her body felt like it was suspended in a fog, her mind barely keeping up with the events around her. But through the haze, one thing was clear. Her entire world had shattered in a single, brutal moment. Her eyes flickered open, the bright hospital lights blinding her for a second. She winced, trying to adjust. Her throat felt like sandpaper, and the ache in her body was unbearable. Every part of her wanted to slip back into the comfort of unconsciousness, but there was one thing she couldn't ignore, the fear gnawing at her insides, the fear for her baby. Megan slowly turned her head, her gaze falling on the empty chair beside her bed. Daniel hadn't arrived yet. The hospital had told her he was on his way, but he wasn't there. She tried to ignore the sting of disappointment, but it was hard to. It had been a long time since Daniel had truly been there for her. Maybe this time would be different. Her hand rested over her stomach, a small movement that made her feel slightly less alone. Was the baby okay? Had her fall done something to it? The doctors had been hopeful, but it was still too early to know for sure. The door to her room creaked open, and for a moment Megan's heart skipped, thinking it might be Daniel. But when she saw who it was, the hope in her chest deflated. Vanessa, the woman who had caused a ripple in Megan's marriage. The one who had taken everything from her without a second thought. Megan's heart clenched in her chest as she tried to gather the strength to speak. Vanessa stood in the doorway, her posture perfect, her expression one of false concern. She was wearing a sleek, black dress, too perfect for a hospital visit, and the cold air around her seemed to pulse with intent. "Is this how you wanted things to go?" Vanessa asked, her voice smooth and deceptively calm. Megan's eyes narrowed, though every muscle in her body begged her to stay still, to avoid the confrontation that was about to unfold. The woman who had pushed her down the stairs, who had betrayed her, was standing in front of her. Vanessa's eyes flickered to the bed, to the faint rise and fall of Megan's chest, then back to Megan's face. "I didn't think you'd survive," she continued, a slight sneer curling her lips. "I didn't expect you to be this resilient." Megan opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Her body was too weak, and the anger that surged within her felt like it could break her in half. Vanessa stepped closer to the bed, not with concern, but with a chilling sense of ownership. "You know, Daniel never really loved you," Vanessa said, her voice low and venomous. "Not the way he loves me. You were a distraction, Megan, a temporary fix." Megan tried to push herself up, but the pain was unbearable, her body still reeling from the fall. She bit down on her lip to stifle the scream threatening to break free. "Why are you here?" Megan rasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Vanessa tilted her head, a glimmer of something dark dancing in her eyes. "To remind you that everything you thought you had, your family, your life, was never really yours. You never stood a chance, Megan." Before Megan could respond, Vanessa turned and walked toward the door, but she paused before exiting, casting one final look over her shoulder. "I don't know how long Daniel will be able to resist me," she said, her tone dripping with satisfaction. "But don't worry. I'll make sure he's with you long enough to see your little world fall apart. That's the least I can do for you." With that, she left, the door clicking shut behind her with an eerie finality. Megan lay there, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The words Vanessa had thrown at her echoed in her mind, but it wasn't just the woman's cruel taunts that hurt. It was the truth in them. Megan closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing, but it was difficult. How could she have been so blind? How long had Daniel been slipping away from her from them? Her thoughts spiraled into a vortex of anger, self-doubt, and guilt. She had to get out of here. She had to find Daniel before Vanessa could manipulate him further. She couldn't. No, she wouldn't let this woman take everything from her. Not her husband, not her baby. She would fight, even if it meant fighting alone. Meanwhile, Daniel stood in the hallway, his hands gripping the railing as he tried to steady his breathing. He had arrived at the hospital, and everything about the situation felt wrong. His mind was clouded with confusion, guilt, and a deep sense of fear. He'd spoken to his father earlier, but the weight of everything was starting to settle in. What had he done? Vanessa had made her move and he had let her. How had he allowed this to go on for so long without confronting the damage it was doing to Megan, to their marriage? He had felt the tension, the distance between them, but he had done nothing. Every excuse he'd used to justify his actions now fell hollow. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt the same warmth for Megan. The love between them had faded, replaced with apathy. It was too late now, or so he thought. As he prepared to go into Megan's room, he paused in the hallway, hearing the faint sound of footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw his father, Chief Wills, approaching, his face set in its usual stern expression. "Daniel," the chief said quietly, his voice like gravel. "We need to talk." Daniel swallowed hard, knowing that whatever his father had to say would only make the weight of his own. Daniel sat across from his father, the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. The sterile, clinical environment of the hospital had faded away in his mind, replaced by the quiet, looming presence of Chief Wills. The older man's gaze was steady, unwavering, as he studied his son. Daniel could feel the heat rising in his chest, the guilt, the anger, the confusion, all swirling together in a storm he didn't know how to weather. "Megan is fighting for her life in there," Chief Wills began, his voice low but commanding. "And you're standing here letting this go on. You think I don't know what's happening? You've been blind, Daniel." Daniel clenched his fists, trying to keep his composure. "I know," he muttered, barely able to meet his father's eyes. "I messed up. I know I've been distant. I've been trying to fix things. But it's not that simple. It's not simple." Chief Wills interrupted, his voice rising with a sharp edge. "You think pushing your wife down this path is not simple? You think letting your affair spiral out of control is something you can fix with a few promises? You're wrong. You're so damn wrong." The harsh truth in his father's words hit harder than Daniel had anticipated. He had always viewed his father as a man of authority, unwavering and stoic. But now, that same authority was aimed directly at him, exposing his every failure, every weak excuse. "I never wanted this," Daniel said quietly, looking down at his hands. "I never wanted to hurt her, but it happened. I let it happen." Chief Will's expression softened just a fraction, but the weight of his words didn't ease. "What you want doesn't matter anymore. Megan is strong, but you've pushed her to the brink. You've pushed her to a point where she's questioning everything she thought she knew. She'll never forgive you unless you do something about it." Daniel felt the sting of those words as they sank in. His mind flashed to Megan's face, the confusion in her eyes, the pain he had seen when he refused to acknowledge what had been happening right under his nose. He had failed her. He had betrayed her, and now she was paying the price for it. "I have to fix this," Daniel whispered, determination creeping into his voice. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." "Then start by telling her the truth," his father replied, his tone gravely serious. "The whole truth. No more lies. No more distractions. Megan deserved that much." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Truth. The truth he had been avoiding. The truth that could shatter the fragile walls he had built around himself. Daniel nodded, his jaw tightening. He didn't know if he could bear it, but his father was right. It was the only way forward. Meanwhile, in the hospital room, Megan lay still, the soft of the machines around her almost lulling her into a daze. Her body ached, but it was the ache in her heart that was the hardest to bear. She had never felt so alone, even with Daniel's presence lingering in the corners of her mind. She had always known something wasn't right. The quiet distance between them, the late nights, the strange, knowing looks. But she had never imagined it would go this far. She had thought, foolishly, that love could fix anything, that time would heal the space that had grown between them. But now, lying here, bruised and broken, she realized just how wrong she had been. Daniel wasn't coming for her. He wasn't coming to save her. And worse, he might never come back the same way again. Her thoughts were interrupted when the door opened with a soft click. She turned, expecting the nurse, but instead it was Daniel. He stood in the doorway, his face a mixture of guilt and determination. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by something more vulnerable, something she hadn't seen in a long time. "Megan," Daniel started, his voice tentative. He didn't move forward immediately, his eyes locked on hers, waiting for some sign that she would let him in. She didn't know what she was expecting from him. But it wasn't this. It wasn't the man who had let their marriage wither away, who had allowed Vanessa to tear them apart. "I don't know where to begin," he said, stepping closer. "But I know I've hurt you. I've hurt you in ways I can't take back. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Megan turned her head slightly, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this was the moment, that this was the turning point. But after everything, after all the lies, how could she? She swallowed hard, the words escaping her in a whisper. "How could you do this, Daniel? How could you let it go this far?" "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But I've been lost. I've been so damn lost, Megan, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know how to make this right. But I promise I'll do whatever it takes. I'll tell you everything." The hesitation in his voice was enough to make her heart falter. Was he telling the truth? Could she believe him after everything? Megan felt a sharp pang of uncertainty in her chest. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about everything. The lies, the betrayal, the distance. But in his eyes, she saw a glimmer of something she hadn't seen in months. Genuine remorse. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she saw the man she had fallen in love with. "Do you know what you've done to me, to us?" she asked, her voice quiet but full of emotion. "Do you know what it feels like to have your entire life shattered? To realize that the person you trusted most was the one who hurt you the most?" Daniel's face contorted with pain as he nodded. I know, Megan, and I'm sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right. But I can't fix this without you. I need you." Her breath caught in her throat. The wall she had built around herself, the one she had used to protect her from him, began to crumble. She wasn't ready to forgive him. Not yet. But the vulnerability in his voice, the rawness, made her feel like there was a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could rebuild. But it wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be fast. "I don't know if I can trust you again," she whispered, the words heavy with the weight of her emotions. Daniel's expression faltered, but he nodded slowly. "I know, and I'm going to earn that trust, one step at a time." As Megan lay there, torn between the pain of the past and the possibility of a future, the silence in the room felt almost suffocating. The decision she would have to make in the coming days would change everything. And yet, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Outside the hospital room, Vanessa stood in the shadows of the hallway, her expression dark and filled with cold determination. She had watched the moment between Daniel and Megan, the tenderness in his eyes, and something inside her snapped. "You think you can just walk back into her life?" Vanessa muttered under her breath. "No, this isn't over. Not by a long shot. The game was just beginning." The days following the confrontation in the hospital were a blur for Megan. The pain from her fall lingered in her body, but the emotional weight of what Daniel had said, what he promised, was far more intense. Every moment she spent lying in that sterile hospital bed, she couldn't help but replay his words, trying to determine if they were sincere or just another attempt to ease his guilt. Megan had always believed in second chances, in the power of forgiveness, but this was different. She wasn't just forgiving a simple mistake. She was being asked to forgive a betrayal so deep, it threatened to destroy everything she knew about love and trust. Daniel had shown up every day since that night. He'd sat by her side, holding her hand, trying to comfort her with quiet apologies and reassurances. But despite his presence, despite his promises, Megan felt a growing distance between them, a chasm that couldn't be crossed with words alone. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door, and she barely had time to react before the door opened, revealing Daniel, his eyes tired but hopeful. "Megan, can we talk?" he asked softly, stepping inside. His voice carried a tentative note, as if he weren't sure she'd let him approach. She didn't respond immediately, keeping her gaze fixed on the window. She hadn't wanted to face him today, but she knew this conversation was inevitable. With a slow, deliberate motion, she shifted in her bed and nodded, her expression unreadable. Daniel sat down beside her, the chair creaking under his weight. His presence beside her felt both comforting and alien, a stark reminder of how much had changed between them. "Megan," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I know words don't mean much right now, but I need you to know that I am so sorry. I can't tell you enough how much I regret what I did. I never wanted to hurt you." She looked at him then, her eyes searching his face for some sign that this time he was truly remorseful. "Do you even know what you've done?" she asked, her voice hoarse, full of quiet anguish. "You've torn everything apart, Daniel. You betrayed me in the worst possible way." Daniel's face twisted with guilt. "I know, and I hate myself for it. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was weak, Megan. I let myself get lost in the wrong things, and I didn't see what I was throwing away." Megan's heart clenched as she absorbed his words. It wasn't that she didn't feel his remorse. She did, but it wasn't enough. He couldn't undo the damage he'd caused. He couldn't erase the pain he'd inflicted on her, and especially on their baby. She took a deep breath, her eyes focusing on her hands. "You don't get it, Daniel," she said softly. "You think you can just apologize and make it better. But that's not how this works. You don't just walk back into my life because you feel bad. You don't get to erase what you've done." The silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of her words. Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but stopped himself, realizing that nothing he said could take away the hurt she was feeling. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," Megan continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "And I don't know if I want to. You've left me questioning everything. Our marriage, our future, even myself." The sting of her words cut deep, but Daniel knew they were true. He had shattered something precious between them, and now he had to face the consequences. "I understand," he said quietly, his voice breaking. "I can't change the past, but I will fight for your trust. I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the man you deserve. But I need you to give me a chance." Megan closed her eyes, the tears welling up despite her best efforts to stay composed. She didn't know if she could do it. She didn't know if she could ever look at him the same way again. But as the pain in her heart grew, something else began to form inside her. Something fragile but real. Hope. Hope that things could get better. Hope that somehow they could heal. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Daniel," she whispered, the words painful to say. "But I want to try. For the baby. For us." Daniel's breath hitched with relief, but he knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain. Trust, once broken, was hard to rebuild, but he was willing to fight for it, for her and for their family. Before Daniel could say anything else, the door opened again, this time with the sharp sound of a quick knock. Both of them turned to see the nurse entering, her expression serious. "Mr. Wills, Mrs. Wills," the nurse said gently, her voice betraying a hint of urgency. "There's someone here to see you. A visitor. It's about your case." Daniel's brows furrowed in confusion. "A visitor?" he repeated, his tone wary. Megan felt a chill run down her spine. Who could possibly be visiting now? Was it about the fall? Was someone trying to make sense of the situation? The nurse stepped aside, revealing a tall figure standing in the doorway. It wasn't someone Megan recognized, but there was something undeniably authoritative about him. The man's sharp suit and calm, composed demeanor screamed of power and control. "Are you Mrs. Megan Wills?" the man asked, his voice firm but respectful. "Yes," Megan replied, her voice cautious. "Who are you?" "I'm Detective Ryan Matthews," the man said, flashing a badge for just a moment before stepping further into the room. "I'm handling the investigation into your fall." Megan's heart skipped a beat. The investigation. She hadn't expected it to happen so quickly, but then again, she hadn't expected this entire situation to spiral out of control so fast. Daniel stood up, his confusion evident. "An investigation? What's this about?" "I'm here to ask about the details surrounding your wife's injury," Detective Matthews explained, his eyes shifting between Megan and Daniel. "We've been looking into the circumstances surrounding her fall, and we need to know if there's anything you can tell us." Megan froze. Her mind was racing. This wasn't just about a push down the stairs anymore. It was something much bigger, something darker, something that was beginning to unravel before her eyes. The sterile hum of the hospital room felt almost oppressive as Detective Matthews' presence filled the space. Megan's heart raced in her chest, her mind struggling to catch up with the weight of the moment. An investigation? This wasn't just about an accident anymore. The push down the stairs was no longer a painful memory she could bury. It was a crime, and someone had to be held accountable. Daniel's jaw tightened as he stood by Megan's side, his mind clouded with confusion. "You don't need to be here," he said, his voice clipped. "We don't need an investigation. This was an accident. Megan's hurt enough as it is. We don't need to stir things up further." Detective Matthews didn't flinch at Daniel's outburst. Instead, he maintained his calm, professional demeanor. "I understand your concern, Mr. Wills, but my job is to uncover the truth, and the circumstances surrounding Mrs. Wills' injury don't add up. We need to ask questions. We need to be sure about what happened." Megan couldn't meet his eyes. She had her suspicions, but hearing the words out loud, the stark reality of the investigation, made everything feel even more real. It wasn't just her fall that was being examined. It was her entire life, the quiet disintegration of everything she thought she knew about her marriage. She couldn't breathe. "How did this happen?" the detective pressed, turning his attention to Megan. "Mrs. Wills, we understand you were pushed down the stairs. Who do you think might be responsible?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to lash out at someone, anyone, who might give her the answers she desperately sought. But all she could do was sit there, helpless. She turned to Daniel, her eyes pleading for him to say something, anything, to explain the chaos that unfolded in their lives. Daniel's gaze hardened as he looked back at the detective. "I don't know who did this," he said, his voice laced with frustration. "But I can tell you it wasn't my wife. Megan didn't fall on her own. Someone pushed her." The detective nodded slowly, his face a study in concentration. "I'm not implying anything, Mr. Wills. We're just trying to piece everything together. Do you have any idea who could be involved in this?" Megan's heart skipped a beat. She knew exactly who could be involved. The image of Vanessa's face, the cold, calculating smile that still haunted her thoughts, flashed in her mind. Vanessa had pushed her. She had to have. But she couldn't say it out loud. Not yet. Not until she had the proof. "Vanessa," Megan whispered, barely audible. Her voice trembled as the name left her lips. Vanessa was there. Daniel stiffened, his expression changing from confusion to something darker, something more desperate. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice rising in alarm. "Vanessa was at the scene? You've got to be mistaken, Megan. That doesn't make sense. Megan's eyes locked onto his. She pushed me, Daniel. She was there. I know it. Detective Matthew shifted his weight, his eyes narrowing as he listened intently. Mrs. Wills, I need you to be absolutely certain. If Vanessa is involved, we'll need solid evidence. Right now, your statement is all we have. Megan could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She wasn't just telling the detective about Vanessa's involvement. She was exposing the truth she had been hiding for so long. She had known about the affair for months, known that something had changed in Daniel. But she had always hoped, always tried to believe that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. But now, with the weight of everything crashing down around her, she realized just how much she had been blind to. She knew, Megan continued, her voice barely a whisper. She knew I was pregnant, and she didn't care. She thought she could have everything, and she wanted me out of the way. Daniel's face went pale, his mouth slightly agape as the pieces clicked together. The betrayal, the affair, the sudden distance between them. It all made sense now, though it was harder to accept than he had ever imagined. You knew, didn't you? Megan's voice was thick with emotion, the words slipping out of her before she could stop them. You've been lying to me this whole time. How long, Daniel? How long were you going behind my back? Daniel stood there, unable to find the words. The silence between them was suffocating, the accusation hanging in the air like a heavy, unspoken truth. His world, his life, had just crumbled in a matter of seconds. I never wanted to go this far, he said finally, his voice a broken whisper. I never wanted to hurt you, Megan. I was weak. I made a mistake. Megan closed her eyes, the tears she had been holding back threatening to spill over. She had wanted to believe him, wanted to hold on to their marriage, to the life they had built, but she couldn't anymore. The trust was gone. The love she had felt for him, the man she had once believed in, had been shattered beyond repair. I don't want to hear it anymore, she replied, her voice trembling with the weight of her decision. I don't want to hear any more excuses, Daniel. I've heard enough. The detective, who had remained silent during the exchange, cleared his throat. Mrs. Wills, we'll do everything we can to investigate this further. If Vanessa is involved, she'll be held accountable. But we need to gather all the facts. Megan nodded absently, her mind already drifting. She couldn't deal with this anymore. She needed time to think, to process everything that had been thrown at her in the past few days. The betrayal, the affair, the push down the stairs. She was living a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Daniel moved closer to her, but she recoiled instinctively. He took a step back, his face falling in defeat. He knew there was nothing he could say or do to fix what had been broken. Megan, I'm so sorry. I love you, he whispered, though she didn't respond. She couldn't. Outside the room, Chief Wills stood, his face etched with a mixture of concern and something more unsettling, guilt. He had known about the affair, had suspected it for months, but now that it had all come crashing down, there was no denying it anymore. His son had failed, and now his family was paying the price. But Chief Wills was a man who allowed failure to go unaddressed. He wasn't going to let his son slip into the same cycle of self-destruction. Not on his watch.